Hello, I am David Ringstrom, a CPA from Atlanta, and welcome to this Park University School of Business presentation of Spreadsheet Basics / Excel charts. Over the course of the roughly next 2 hours, I'm going to cover a number of basic things about Excel, but I find that in teaching Excel classes that even folks that have been using Excel for a long time, even if you have some experience with Excel, there are often little gaps in your knowledge. And so my goal with this presentation is to cover a lot of fundamental information about Excel that particularly novice users or even long-time users may miss about using Excel more effectively. And then also we'll cover some ground on working with charts. Charts are definitely an area in Excel where users get tangled up and often do things the hard way. And so I'll be discussing some ways to use charts more effectively. I'm going to be teaching from Excel 2010 today, but pretty much everything I cover is going to be in the same location in Excel 2013 or Excel 2007. If there's any big differences, then I'll make notes of that on the corresponding slides. The biggest difference that you will note is that Excel 2007 does not have a file menu. So during this presentation, if you see me click on the file menu or I mention the file menu and you're using Excel 2007, just note that you'll click on that little round button that's called the Office button instead. If you happen to still be using Excel 2003, then some of the slides will have notes in blue along the bottom, and those are the equivalent steps you would carry out in your version of Excel. Let's start out with a few basics about Microsoft Excel. When you first launch the program, typically you're going to see that a blank workbook on the screen. So files in Excel are known as workbooks. And then if we look at the bottom, we can see there's three tabs, which is typical for an Excel workbook, for a blank workbook. And so each tab is known as a worksheet. You can have dozens, or sometimes folks have hundreds of worksheets within a workbook. Typically, though, when you start getting beyond into the dozens, or particularly in the hundreds, you're probably using the wrong tool for the application you're trying to do. There's probably a better way. So one of the challenges in Excel is folks learn enough about it to use it as a hammer, and then everything in turn starts looking like a nail. And so part of my goal today is to empower you to use Excel in a more nuanced fashion, but also hopefully we'll kind of see some of the limits of Excel and when to move on to something else. But in any case, for starting out, most of your workbooks, it can be real hard for you to get in over your head because there's so many different ways that you can use Excel. So we can add new worksheets as we need to. Within each worksheet, we're going to see a little box, and the box is referred to as a cell. And the way that we can keep track of where we are in an Excel is based on a guide that kind of goes along the top of the worksheet and along the side. We see that each column has a letter and each row has a number. And so where those two triangulate, in this case I've highlighted cell J5, that's how I know what cell I'm in. And over the course of the day, we're going to be creating formulas that reference different cells and link data together, and that's why those cell addresses are going to be important to us. Two ways we can tell which cell we're in. One, we're going to be able to see that the worksheet frame gets colored, so we can see that J is shaded and 5 is shaded, so that's one way. There's also a little place in the work on the screen called the name box. And there's actually over 30 different things we can do with that little box. It's called the name box. Most users just simply think of that box as a place that you can tell the address of the cell that you're in, but it does have many other purposes. But in any case, does tell you at a glance specifically what cell you're in. Each worksheet in Excel 2007 and later has over 16,000 columns and over 1 million rows. Now, you may encounter some older workbooks that are only going to have 256 columns and 65,000 rows. Those are the old style workbooks, but the new workbooks that are in the modern versions of Excel all have up to over 16,000 columns and over 1 million rows. Now we are stuck with those constraints. We can't add more rows. So if we have a data set that is, say, 1.5 million rows, we can't put all those records on a worksheet. Excel will just chop them off the bottom. That's one of those instances where we need to look to a different program, maybe take all that data, put it into Microsoft Access, which is a database program, and work with it in that fashion. But since we've got so many rows and so many columns, very unlikely that you'll ever even wish that you could add more space. And most likely you're going to only ever use a tiny fraction of the space that's available on a given worksheet. One of the most important things that you need to keep in mind in Microsoft Excel is that you need to frequently save your work. In Microsoft Excel, it's so easy to get immersed in a spreadsheet, and you can spend hours on a spreadsheet and then suddenly the power goes out or your computer crashes or you do something that you can't undo in your workbook, and all of a sudden you don't have any fallback position and you have to start all over again. To save your work, once you create a new workbook, the best thing to do is go ahead and go to the File menu, choose Save As, and then assign a meaningful name to your workbook. Once you do so, you can then make it easier to save your workbook because we see in the bottom left-hand corner of the slide here that there's an icon we can click. Looks like a little floppy disk from back in the day next to Excel, the little blue disk. Or there's a keyboard shortcut. Excel is full of keyboard shortcuts, and highly recommend that as we go, you do pay attention to any keyboard shortcuts that I point out, because keyboard shortcuts can really save you a lot of time with regard to repetitive tasks. And so our very first keyboard shortcut that we want to memorize is Control S for saving our file. So that way, just periodically, you'll get the vibe for what is right for you, but just periodically press Control S. That'll let you instantly save your file and then move on, and gives you a fallback position in case something goes awry. Now, there are close to 30 different file formats that you can save your work in, but typically to start out, you're going to be using one of three different choices. The default format in Excel 2007 and later, the files are going to have an XLSX extension, and that stands for an Excel workbook. And a special type of Excel workbook that does not have any macros in it. Macros are programming code that you can add to Excel workbooks that allow you to automate repetitive tasks. But typically, most users don't even understand what macros are or have workbooks that need them. But you start getting into more sophisticated applications or any kind of repetitive task that you want to automate, macros can be a helpful tool. But we want to keep in mind that if we save our workbook as an XLSX file, we're going to throw away any macros that are in that workbook. But for the majority of the time, the XLSX format will be fine. It's just if you encounter a workbook that someone else has created that has macros in it and you need to give it a new name, that's when you'll need to pay attention and save it as an XLSM file, which you'll see in the Save As type that's going to be a macro-enabled Excel workbook. There's another type you can save it as, which is the XLS format. And that's the format that we used back in the day with Excel 97 through Excel 2003. Those workbooks had 256 columns and roughly 65,000 rows. And those, you can save your workbooks in that format, but not all the newest features and the newer versions of Excel will work when you save the file in that old format. So probably 99% of the time, the XLSX format is going to suit your needs. Just do be aware of these other formats just in case you run across a special need. For instance, if you're saving a workbook that you're going to share with someone else and maybe you're not sure what version of Excel they're using, the XLS format is pretty safe to use. But Microsoft did recently finally cut off all support for Excel 2003, so I do find that hardly anyone is still out there using Excel 2003. There are still some holdouts, and so if you need to share a workbook with someone using that file format, that's when you'll need the XLS format. Otherwise, typically just saving it as an Excel workbook will be just fine. And then don't forget to periodically press Control S as you're working. One of the aspects of Excel that tends to be mind-boggling for beginners is that there are multiple ways to carry out the same tasks. And widening a column is just one good example of the multiple ways that we can widen a column with. So the easiest way to widen a column width is to take our cursor and position it in the worksheet frame in between, next to the right hand side of the column that we wish to widen. So in this case, column A, we want it to be wide enough to display the words interest rate. And so when we take our cursor and position it in between the A and B, it turns into a double-headed arrow. We double click, Excel will go ahead and widen that column so we can see the entire word interest rate. Other ways that we can widen the columns is if we go top of the screen, it's kind of grayed out, but we can see there's a format command. And so if we went to the format menu, we could choose auto fit column width, or we could go in and choose column width from that menu and manually change our column width. We also see that we can right click on the column on the worksheet frame. That will display a shortcut menu that has a column width command. And from there, we could manually type in a column width. Now, initially, these column widths are going to look like kind of cryptic numbers, but with some experience in Excel, you'll start getting a sense of what these column width sizes mean. And in particular, if you have one column that you want to be a certain column width, if you right-click on it, you can see what the width is. You can then go to a second column, right-click, and make that column width be exactly the same. But typically when you're first starting out building a new spreadsheet, simply double clicking on the worksheet frame in between to the right of the column that you wish to widen, that's going to be the simplest way to widen up that column. To see those techniques in Excel, I could click on column A. So if I want to do something to the column, I have to highlight the whole column. I can go to the format menu and I can see there's a command for auto fit column width. And so if I chose that, then it would widen up that column. Now I'm going to undo that, and to undo it, there's an undo command up here, keyboard shortcuts Control-Z. So if I click that, that's going to put my column width back. If I went to the format menu, I could also go to column width. That would allow me to kind of manually resize the width of that column. So I could type in something wider, like, maybe change it to 12, see that that's wide enough, but once again, I'm going to undo that. Other ways to get to column width, right click. There's a column width command here. Again, that one requires that I manually type in the width that I want. So two easiest ways are either to select the column and say auto fit the column width, or simply take my cursor and position it on the worksheet frame. When I get the double-headed arrow, I can double click and that widens up. The next challenge that we have in Excel is managing how numbers get formatted. In a blank Excel worksheet, none of the cells have any particular formatting, and so when you type in a number, depending how you type it, there won't be any percent signs or commas or dollar signs, and you have to add those. Now, as with many things in Excel, there are hard ways and easy ways to do this. And so if we're entering a percentage, easiest way to do that is to go ahead and type the percent sign along with the number. If we enter the number just as a decimal, such as 0.0525, and press enter, we'll then have to go back to that worksheet cell, and then there is a percent icon that we can click on the toolbar. When we do that, though, it will add the percent sign, but it'll take away our decimals. So we then have to use the decimal place buttons to add the decimals back. Those are steps that we can save if we go ahead and type the percent sign straight away. We can see above the percent sign, there's a little drop-down list that allows us to choose number formats. But to have the most control over how numbers get formatted in Excel, we see there's a little button in the corner of the number section of the Home tab. That step that's labeled A on the slide. If we click that little arrow there, that's going to display the Format Cells dialog box, and that gives us the most control over formatting numbers. In this case, my cell is already formatted with a comma, but I'm going to go over to the clear command. It's a little arrow, it looks like a little eraser, and I'm going to say clear all. So if I come in here and I say 5.25, actually, if I do it the long way, I put in 0.0525, then that's what I'm going to see in my spreadsheet. Just the raw format, just a raw number, there's no formatting to it. So we click on the percent sign. It does change to 5%, but then we lost our decimal places. We then have to use these little indicators to expand that and then get to where we can see our actual full percentage. Now, we'll go back and undo those steps. Go back to our blank cell. If we put in 5.25 and then a percent sign, then the numbers get formatted in one fell swoop. We don't have to bother with any formatting. Or if we wanted to do something special to our number formatting, we click the little arrow in the corner here. That displays our Format Cells dialog box. And so depending on what type of number formatting we choose, we'll get different choices. We click on currency, we see there's different currency formats. We click on number, different number formats. We can choose whether to have commas. Click on percentage. The only option we have is the number of decimal places that we want to use there. Similarly, when I'm entering numbers in Excel, hard ways and easy ways to do that. If it's a small number like 48, then I can just put 48 in the worksheet cell and I'll be done. If I'm entering a number like 30,000, then that can end up just being 30 and 5 zeros, which can be hard to read. The bigger the number, the harder it becomes to read. So that's where our number formatting comes into place. Now, just like I typed the percent sign when I typed in my percentage, I can type in a $sign if I'm entering numbers, and I can also type the commas. And so that allows me to go ahead and do the formatting as I go, instead of using the currency button or the comma button, because once again, when I use those buttons on the toolbar, they're going to add decimal places or take decimal places away, sometimes complicates what I'm trying to input. So if I just go ahead and type out the number the way I wish to see it on the screen in the worksheet cell, then I don't have to spend any time after the fact formatting it. Back to my spreadsheet, if I want to enter the number 48, I can click on cell B2, type a 48, press enter, goes down to the next cell. If I type in 30,000, press enter, then that number can be a little tough to read. Is it 3,000? Is it 300,000? Is it 30,000? And so if I come up to the top, click on my accounting format, then it adds a $sign and 2 decimal places. Perhaps I didn't want those decimal places, so I then have to come in here and erase the decimal places. But then I end up with a problem where Excel has used a special format where the $sign's on the far left, and maybe I don't want it on the far left. So those are complications we can run into when we're formatting numbers. So if you end up in that situation and these icons aren't doing what you want, click on the number, and then we can come back in here. In this case, I'm just going to choose currency with 0 decimal places, click OK, and we see that now I got the number looking the way that I would like it. But to save all that rigmarole from the beginning, if I say clear all, if I had typed in a $sign 30, 123, press enter, then I would have formatted those, I would have entered the number and formatted it in one fell swoop. At this point, we're ready to use our first worksheet function in Excel. So we've done some simple arithmetic just by adding a value from one cell to another cell and creating that series. But many times in Excel, and a lot of the power in Excel is that it can do very sophisticated calculations for us. And these involve what are called worksheet functions. And so to use a worksheet function, we first click on the cell where we wish to do a calculation. And so what I want to calculate is what my loan payment would be. I know I've got an interest rate of 5.25%. I know I've got a term of 48. My principal is 30,000. What would that payment be, that monthly payment? If I click on the cell, in this case B4, then up on the formula bar is a little FX button. When I click that FX button, that launches a dialog box that's known as the Insert Function dialog box. And I can use that to search for the function that I want to do. And in that search for a function field, I can just type in plain English what it is I'm trying to do. So I put in loan payment. I click go, or if I press enter, Excel will then give me a list of likely candidates. So it doesn't tell me specifically, but it does narrow the field and says, take a look at these. These may be what you're seeking. And so the first one on the list is the PMT function. And so when I click on that, it says it calculates the payment for a loan based on constant payments and a constant interest rate. That's what I'm going for here with my loan payment, so I click OK. That then, the dialog box then changes and gives me a function arguments dialog box. and that is where I can actually build out the inputs for the particular formula. Now, I don't have to use this every time I want to create a worksheet function, but when I'm first getting my head around worksheet functions, it's going to be a great way for me to be able to go through and just make sense of things and figure out how to write these particular formulas. So we see that there's a rate field, and that's where I'm going to put my interest rate. Bit of trivia about Excel is when we are working with interest rates, Excel always bases things off of a monthly interest rate. And so in cell B1, I've got 5.25%, which is an annual rate. That's why we see in the insert function dialog box, I'm doing some division. I'm saying divide by 12 so that my payment calculates correctly, because I don't want to charge 5.25% per month. I want to charge 5.25% per year. So we take that to get our monthly rate. Within the number of periods, we can get that from cell B2, which is 48. The PV stands for present value, and that means the money that I'm borrowing. So presently, I'm going to be borrowing $30,000. PV is just financial speak for present value. It's just shorthand for how much are you borrowing today. So I fill in all those arguments, and then I click OK, and Excel places that formula inside the worksheet cell. Now you'll see that there's some arguments that are bold and there's some that are not bold. So in this case, the future value and the type, those aren't applicable, so I can just skip those. But the first three arguments, the rate, number of periods, and the present value, those are required, and so I do have to fill those in. Otherwise, Excel won't be able to create the calculation for me. So back to our spreadsheet. Another trick, right now I'm down at the bottom of the spreadsheet. When I want to get to the top of the spreadsheet, if I hold down the Control key and tap the Home key, so Control and then the Home key on my keyboard, that takes me back to cell A1. The cell where I wish to put in my calculation here is cell B4. So once I'm familiar with Excel, I can start typing equals payment and fill in all the arguments. But until I reach that point, the function wizard is going to help me along. I can click here, and what I'm looking for is, we'll just say car payment this time. So we'll say we're looking for a car payment. We'll click go. And so it gives me a list of, as I click on each one, it's going to tell me what that particular function does. And so sometimes I might have to do a little bit of searching, but in this case, the one I wanted is at the top. And so another trick, many times in Excel, we can simply double click on things instead of clicking OK. So in this case, since I want the payment function, I can double click in place of having to move my mouse and to click on the OK button. So we double click. That gives me the function arguments. So I can say my interest rate is here, and I need to divide that by 12. My number of periods, I can choose that there. The amount that I'm borrowing, I can click right there. Notice that Excel shows me the result inside the function argument box. Typically, I'm going to see all the arguments here on this list. Depending on the functions you're using, you might sometimes have to scroll this down to see some additional functions. So be on the lookout for a scroll bar here. If you see a scroll bar over on the right-hand side, that means that there's additional arguments that you need to pay attention to. But each little input for this calculation is called an argument, and so the interest rate, the number of periods, the present value, with those three pieces of information, Excel can calculate our loan payment. We click OK, puts the formula in. Now in this case, this is kind of a special case. Excel makes this be a negative number, and it does that because the folks at Microsoft figured that this payment is an outflow, and so they wanted to present it as they want to be helpful and present it as a negative number. In my case, it's not really helpful because it can complicate things. So if you don't want to see it as a negative number, we can click in the formula bar and simply put a minus sign in front of that. That will change it to be a positive number. So I can't remember in the rest of the handout if I leave this negative or positive. So for right now, we'll make it be negative again. I just wanted to show you that if you did want to change the sign, you could simply put a minus sign in front of it, and that would change that for you. Once I enter text in a worksheet cell, I can then format it, and I can either format one cell at a time, or I can format a block of cells at a time. I can also use keyboard shortcuts, or I can click on icons, or go into that Format Cells dialog box that we've seen to be able to make more changes to it. So in the worksheet cell, we're going to put in some words. We'll put in payment number, and put in date, interest, principal, and balance. What we're building out is an amortization table. So let's assume that we wanted to buy a car and we want to use Excel to figure out what our payment's going to be and then also what our interest expense is going to be on a month-by-month basis over the course of the loan. So these headings that I'm putting on row 6 are going to be the headings for the amortization table. Once I type in those words, we can then see that I'll be able to select the block of cells, either press Control B to make it bold or click on the bold icon, underline the words, and then also center the text. So in our spreadsheet, we'll put in payment number and date, interest, principal, and then balance. I could click on payment and then press Control B and bold that one cell and do it one cell at a time. Or the more efficient way is to select with my mouse. I'm holding down the left button, selecting a block of cells, and then press Control B. Notice that Control B is a toggle. The first time I press Control B, it makes it bold. If I press Control B again, it unbolds it. Same thing for underline. If I do Control U, first time underline, second time turns it off. So these are the shortcuts for the commands that are up here. Notice in Excel, when we hover over certain commands, in this case, Excel tells us that Control B is the keyboard shortcut. So keyboard shortcuts can save us a lot of time. There are far more keyboard shortcuts in Excel than you can reasonably memorize. So don't feel like you need to memorize all of them. Just having a handful of keyboard shortcuts for tasks that you do repetitively can really save you a lot of time, though. So we'll go through, make this bold, make it underlined, and then to center it, we're going to click the center icon. Now, in my courses, you'll always hear me talk at length about keyboard shortcuts because they can save so much time, but not every feature in Excel has a keyboard shortcut. For instance, centering text, if we were using Microsoft Word or Microsoft Outlook, I could use Control E to center text. But Control E doesn't work for centering text in Excel. If that means I have to go move my mouse to the top of the screen and click that center text icon. However, if I'm using Excel 2007 or later, I can create my own keyboard shortcuts for pretty much anything that I want to do. So in this case, what I would do is I would right-click on the center text icon, and then I would choose to add it to the Quick Access toolbar. The Quick Access toolbar is that little toolbar that's right at the top row of my Excel screen. And by default, everyone's Quick Access toolbar has a save button, has an undo, and a redo. And we can add other icons up there. So we see that when we right-click and say Add to Quick Access Toolbar, it adds it to the Quick Access Toolbar, which one gives us an easier target to click on things, particularly if it's a command that maybe is on the Data tab or the Formulas tab. Instead of having to switch to that tab, I can just choose that icon from the Quick Access Toolbar. But more importantly, any icons that I place up on the Quick Access Toolbar gain a keyboard shortcut. And so we see that when we press the Alt key, in this case, I would create a keyboard shortcut for centering text. It would be Alt 4. Now, for me, my Quick Access Toolbar has a ever-changing cast of icons up there depending on what projects I'm working on. So if one day I'm doing a lot of text centering, I might put center text up there. And then when I'm done, I can right-click on that icon and I can remove it and make room for a different icon. So there's nothing permanent about the Quick Access Toolbar. It can just be an ever-changing cast of characters, but we'll see in a moment when we go to Excel that very easy to add and remove those icons. So back to Excel, let me get my Quick Access Toolbar reset so it looks like yours. So typically you just have 3 icons up there. And so any icons I want to put up there, if I right-click, I say Add to Quick Access Toolbar, that puts that icon up there. Now this text here of highlight, I'm going to make it left aligned. We're going to see if I press the Alt key, the 4 shows up under center text. I do 4, that centers my text. So that allowed me to create my own keyboard shortcut. Anywhere that I want to center the text, I can just select it and then do Alt 4. If at some point if I find I'm not centering text as often, I can right click on that icon, say remove it from the quick access toolbar, because anytime I need to put it back, it's just a simple matter of going to that icon, right clicking, and saying add it to the quick access toolbar. We're now going to add our first formulas to our spreadsheet. In column A, we want to create a series of numbers. And this is another area of Excel where there's a number of different ways to do that. But since we're starting out with the very basics, we'll just go about this in a rather simple fashion so you can get a little bit of experience with working with formulas. So in cell A7, I'm going to type a 1. In cell A8, I'm going to type my first formula in my spreadsheet. To signify I'm creating a formula, I type an equal sign. Notice I haven't typed any equal signs yet. I've just been either typing words or numbers. But if I type an equal sign, that tells Excel that I'm creating a formula. And so in this case, I want to take whatever is in cell A7 and I want to add 1 to it. And so when I press enter, I'm going to see that Excel is going to return a 2 there. I'll see a 2 in cell A8. I can then copy that formula down, and there are several different ways to copy it, but the easiest way to copy it is to go back up to cell A8, and there's a little notch in the right-hand corner that's known as the fill handle. And so when I grab that with my left mouse button, I can drag down as far as I want to go, and when I release the mouse, Excel is going to have copied the formula down those across and fill up those cells. And so what we're going to see is that as we copy it down, when I copy it down to row 9, where it says A7, Excel will change that to A8, and then it'll change it to A9 and A10 and so on. When I'm creating simple formulas where I'm just adding, subtracting, dividing, multiplying, we can see that I use a plus sign to signify that I want to add, a dash to subtract, a slash to divide, or an asterisk to multiply. So back to our spreadsheet, I'll put a 1 here in this cell, go down to cell A8, I'll type an equal sign, and I can take my mouse and simply click on A7, or I can type the address, either way. To signify I want to add something to it, I type a plus sign, I add a 1, and then as always, I need to press enter to store that formula. So I'm only going to see this formula when I'm actually editing inside the cell. When I press enter, notice I see the result, which is a 2. Now, if I do go back up to that cell, I can then see the formula in the formula bar, which is this row up here. I can click in there and edit the formula. Or if I double click inside the cell, that allows me to edit the formula in case I reference the wrong cell or need to make a change. To then copy the formula down, I click back on the cell I wish to copy, grab that little fill handle, and then we'll just drag down and almost stopped in the right spot. There we go. So we have a 48-month car payment. And so Excel created that series of numbers. So as in this case, it started out A7 plus 1. Now it's A8 plus 1, A9 plus 1, A10 plus 1. So Excel automatically changes the row numbers as we go. Next thing I want to talk about is Excel's order of operations. And what order of operations means is sometimes in a worksheet cell, you might be doing addition and multiplication or subtraction and division. And you may wish to control the order that these things happen in. If you don't take any special precautions, then inside a worksheet cell, no matter where it is, no matter how you've created the formula, Excel is going to do division first, then multiplication, then addition, then subtraction. So if you need to alter the order of that, so if you needed to, say, multiply something together before you divided it, then you put parentheses around the part that you wish to control first. So from simple calculations like addition, we don't have to worry about that. But if we're doing any combination of addition and subtraction along with multiplication or division, that's when the order of operations becomes important. So if you're adding and multiplying at the same time, or if you're dividing and subtracting, anything like that, you might need to put parentheses around the addition portion or the subtraction portion so that Excel carries out that calculation first and then divides the result of that or multiplies it as the case may be. So we can see that we're going to go in and build in column C, calculate our monthly interest formula. And so we're going to do that, we're going to say equals B3 times B1. So it's going to take our interest, the amount that we're borrowing, our principal, multiplying it by our annual interest rate. But again, we only want this interest amount for a given month, so we're going to divide that by 12. So in this case, I don't need any parentheses because I'm going to get the same exact answer if I were to multiply B3 times B1 and then divide by 12, or if I put them in parentheses. It doesn't matter if I divide B1 by 12 first or if I do it after I've multiplied it by B3. I'll get the same answer either way, but I could add in the parentheses if I chose to. In our spreadsheet, we'll write our formula. So we're going to say equals principal multiplied by interest rate divided by 12. I would get the same exact result if I were to say equals 12. Well, can't divide by 12, but I could say the interest rate divided by 12 and then times principal. Doesn't matter either way, get the same exact result. And so that is my formula to calculate the monthly interest. If you have any experience with Excel, you've probably noticed how when you take a formula and copy it down, Excel changes the row numbers automatically. And many times that can be a convenience for us because it helps us write formulas faster, because many times that is what we want. But sometimes we won't want that to happen. We want to refer to a specific cell, and we don't want, our spreadsheet won't give us the answer we want if Excel keeps changing those row numbers. So that's going to introduce the concept of absolute references. What absolute references allow us to do is lock in our reference to a specific cell so it won't change. And we can always identify absolute references in our spreadsheets by way of the dollar signs. So if I see a $B, $4, that means that I don't want Excel to change the column letter, nor do I want to change the row number. I always want it to refer absolutely to row B4. Now, as I get more sophisticated in Excel, sometimes I might want a dollar sign in front of the row number, but not the column letter, or vice versa. But if you want to be absolutely sure, it doesn't hurt to put the dollar sign around each. And in fact, an easy way to do so is by pressing the F4 key. When you're working on your formula, once you select a cell or type its address, if you press the F4 key, that will toggle the dollar signs on, and each time you press F4, it changes the position of those dollar signs until eventually they turn off. Back to my spreadsheet, I'm going to put in my principal formula here, and in this case, the formulas in this column always need to refer to cell B4. Now, one of the challenges with B4 is that it's got a negative number, so I'm going to fix that by adding a minus sign here. And then when I click on cell B4, if I press the F4 key, notice that puts a dollar sign in front of the B and in front of the 4. If I toggle the dollar sign back and forth, it makes it go away. So in this case, $B, $4, as I copy the formula down, it's always going to refer back to that payment cell. Then I can tell it that I want to subtract the interest for that month. When I press enter, I then get to see the result of that particular formula. Now, if I were to go back, if I didn't remember the dollar sign trick, then I could say minus and click here and use the arrow keys. Actually, it gets trickier if we don't use the F4 key. So if I said minus, I could say $B, $4, and then minus that amount. But clearly, the easiest way is going to be to say equals, click on that cell, add our dollar sign by pressing the F4 key, and then subtracting what we need to. And in this case, forgot my dollar sign at the beginning. So to edit, another keyboard shortcut I'm using is I'm pressing the F2 key. So if I press the F2 key, that lets me, that's the same as double clicking on the cell, and I can add that dollar sign there, press enter, get my proper result. If you've been working with Excel for a bit, then you probably know that if you type words that are too long for a given cell, Excel just chops off the words if there's something in the adjacent cell. Otherwise, it carries the text over into the next column. Numbers work a little bit differently. if we enter numbers that are too large for a given column width, then what we're going to see are a series of pound signs. And so if you're working in Excel and you see a bunch of pound signs in a given column, that means the numbers are larger than can be presented in that given form, in that given column. So when we get back to our spreadsheet for column E, I'm going to shrink it up a little bit so that it won't be wide enough. And then we'll see that when we do our balance formula there, where we take our principal amount and then subtract, we take our the loan amount that we started with, which is $30,000, subtract that first month's principal payback. When we subtract that, we'll get a net balance, and by shrinking the column up, you'll be able to see those pound signs. That's nothing to be concerned about. As soon as we widen up the columns, then the pound signs go away, and then we're back to where we were, where we can see our actual results in the spreadsheet. So in this case, we're going to write our formula. I'm going to say, and notice a way that I can navigate in the spreadsheet. I can either use my mouse and point on things, or I can type an equal sign, use the up arrow key, and navigate to a cell. Then I can type in my next operator, which in this case is a minus sign, and then arrow over to that cell, and then press enter. Notice in this case, Excel automatically widened the column. So sometimes it does that for numbers. It doesn't do that for text. But if it had not automatically widened the column for me, then I would end up with a series of pound signs in that column. And so the way to make those make the numbers fit in that cell, one way is to remove the decimal places that didn't necessarily do it. Sometimes if I change the font, reduce the font down, that didn't quite get it done either. So let's just put this back the way it was. Let's try again from the top. So we're going to say equals that number minus that number. We're going to press enter. And so again, if the column gets shrunk up, easiest way to widen it, double click on the worksheet frame to the right of that particular column. That widens it up. Also on the format menu, there is an auto fit column width that will also cause it to go ahead and widen up the column for us. We're now ready to sum some numbers in our spreadsheet, and there are, as always, hard ways and easy ways to add up numbers in Excel. The easy way, in this case, if we want to add up our interest and principal cells, the interest column and the principal column, is to select those two cells down at the bottom of our amortization table. And then on the Home tab in Excel 2007 and later is a little auto sum button. And also is a keyboard shortcut that's Alt equal. And when we click that, Excel will automatically add the sum function to both of those cells. So the sum function is a worksheet function, and what it does is it adds up the values for a range of cells. So in this case, we can say where it says C7 through C54, think of that colon as a through. So we're saying add up cell C7 all the way through C54. And so instead of putting in the formula in column C and then dragging it over to the right to fill in column D, we see from the start, if we go ahead and select those two cells and then click our auto sum button, it'll go ahead and tally up both columns at the same time. So when we refer to something like C7 through C7, that's referred to as a range of cells. So in Excel's vernacular, referencing a block of cells, another way we see it referred to is as a range of cells. In the spreadsheet, to get back down to the bottom, trick we learned is we click here and we're going to do Control down, takes us down to the bottom. So I can select both of these two cells here, click my auto sum icon. Notice that when I pause over it, it says Alt equals in parentheses. That's my keyboard shortcut. So I can do either way. If I click that, initially I get pound signs here. That means that the column is not wide enough to display the entire number. Now notice when I hover over the number, the pound signs, Excel then does show me the number so I can see that there's actually a number there. But in this case, I need to widen both columns. And so to do a 2-for-1, I'm going to select both columns, and then I'm going to double click on the border here. That widens up both columns. And so I can see that over the course of the loan, I would pay $3,000 in interest roughly on a $30,000 loan over 4 years. So if I want to dress up these numbers a little bit, I can select them here and I can click in here and I can add a border, add that border there and kind of make it fancy. And so there's my total. With regard to managing our worksheets, by default in Excel, every workbook starts out with 3 worksheets. It is possible to change that to have only 1 worksheet, and you can add other ones as you wish. But let's just say you've got your 3 worksheets. If you wish to rename a worksheet, so if you don't want it to be called Sheet 1, you want it to be called Car Payment, then one way to rename it is to simply double-click on the Worksheet tab and then type the name that you want and press Enter. Longer way is to right-click on the tab and choose Rename. That will then also put you in the same spot where you can change the name of your worksheet. You can copy and paste worksheets, and in particular, if you encounter a new workbook that someone else built, maybe you need to make some changes, you're nervous about making those changes, you could right-click on the Sheet tab and choose Move or Copy, and then make a copy of that sheet. You could also take the workbook and save it as another file, but sometimes creating a second file is not optimal, and maybe just having a second sheet inside the workbook is a better fallback position. But do note that you can delete worksheets that you don't want, but deleting a worksheet is one of the actions that you cannot undo. There are many things that you can do in Excel that you can then undo by pressing Control-Z or clicking the undo icon that I've marked at the top of the screen. But if you go through and you delete, say, any blank worksheets from your workbook, you're going to lose the ability to undo anything you've done prior to that deleting. So do make sure that you delete sheets with care, because as soon as you delete a sheet, it's going to wipe out your list of things that you can undo. And so that's one of the downsides to, and also just one of the nuances of the undo feature, is that once you delete a sheet, it's gone and there's no undoing it. You would have to go back to a copy of the file that you had saved previously. So in Excel, if I want to rename this tab, I can either right click and I can go up and I can choose Rename, and that lets me change the name. Or if I double click on the tab, I can just bypass that menu. I can call this Car Payment. Now notice if I go up to my undo list, I've got a few actions that I can undo. But if I were to come in here and decide I don't need Sheet 2, I right click on Sheet 2, I choose Delete. Excel asks me, okay, and it didn't even ask me if I wanted to undelete it because that sheet was blank. Usually I get a prompt. So in fact, I'm going to type something here, and then I'm going to right click and delete. And so there's my prompt. Notice my undo icon is disabled. I can't undo anything. Now, if I want to make a copy of this particular sheet, when I right click on it, I can choose Move or Copy. And so in this case, I want to copy it to the same workbook. So I can just say Create a Copy and then click OK. And when I do so, I have my original sheet that's called Car Payment. My new sheet is called Car Payment, and Excel numbers it. It puts a parenthesis and a 2 so that it indicates that it's a copy. I could then rename it and give it some better name. Or if I decide I don't need that copy anymore, I can right click on it and I can choose Delete. And then I click Delete on the prompt. That takes that sheet away. Now, one of the problems you've probably already noticed with my spreadsheet is that once your spreadsheets get to a certain size, they become unwieldy, because once you scroll down, you can't see the rows at the top, and you start losing track of which column, what data is in which column. And so there's a feature we can use in Excel that is called the Freeze Panes feature. And what that allows me to do is freeze a portion of the worksheet, and one or more rows, freeze those at the top of the screen, so that as I scroll down, I always see those rows at the top of the screen. So a little bit of nuance to it. What I have to do is position my cursor just below and to the right of whatever rows I want to freeze. So we'll start out simple. Initially, let's just say I want to keep rows 1 through 6 at the top of the screen. In that case, I would put my cursor in cell A7. I can then go to the View tab of Excel's menu, click on Freeze Panes, and then step 4 there we can see Freeze Panes. When I do so, I'm going to see a black border or a black line appear across my worksheet below row 6. That's how I know that those are the rows that are frozen. Now that black line is just a visual that appears on screen. It's not a border for the worksheet cell, and also it's not going to show up on my printout. It's simply an indication that I have chosen to freeze those particular rows at the top of the screen. To freeze those panes, I want to get back up to the top of my spreadsheet. Easy way to do that, hold down the Control key, tap the Home key, get my cursor over here, Control Home, takes me up to cell A1. And so what I want to freeze in place is rows A1 through A6. Put my cursor in cell A7. On the View tab, I go to Freeze Panes, and then I choose Freeze Panes once again. That then locks in the totals, and so now at the titles. So as I scroll down, I can always keep track of exactly which row I'm in, and I don't lose sight of what the rows are. If I want to unfreeze the panes, I go back to the View command, go to Freeze Panes, and it's a toggle. I can choose Unfreeze Panes. Now the rows are all going to float in that fashion. If I wanted to freeze column A in place, I'd put my cursor here and then do Freeze Panes. This way, as I move to the right, I would always see the payment number that I'm on, and as I scroll down, I would always see the columns that I'm in. And so if I need to change how the freeze works, I have to unfreeze it, reposition the cursor where I want to see it, make sure that the rows I want to see are actually on the screen, and then choose my freeze panes, and then I'm all set. Next thing I want to do is see how to manage my print settings, because many times when we create a spreadsheet, we need to generate a printout for documentation or to share with someone else. And so we want to see what our printout's going to look like before we actually get it on paper so that we're not wasting paper. One way to do that is to go to the View tab and click on Page Break Preview. When you choose Page Break Preview, the on-screen version of the Excel spreadsheet will change so that you kind of get a indication of what it will look like on a piece of paper. And so we can see that it's going to show us where the page breaks are. And in this particular case, we're going to see that we would end up with most of the spreadsheet on one page and just a few rows lapping over on a second page. And so a lot of our spreadsheets, we can just shrink them down just a tiny bit and fit it all on one page instead of using up 2 pieces of paper. One way to do that is to go to the Page Layout tab, and where it says height and width, we can say make the printout fit on 1 page wide by 1 page tall. Now that's very convenient, but when we use that, we do need to keep an eye on that field below it that's called Scale that I've marked in yellow. What the scale shows us is how much Excel has to reduce the font size to make it fit on the number of pages that we requested. So in this case, I requested 1 page wide by 1 page tall. And so it's going to shrink it to 85% of its normal size. When this becomes a problem is when that scale figure gets to 63% or below. Whenever the scale drops below that, in my experience, if you print out a piece of paper and hand it to somebody else, they're probably going to be frustrated with you because they're going to have a hard time reading it. So we always want to try to keep that scale figure at 64% or higher, because if we're bumping much below that, probably time to either print it on more pieces of paper, or if we have access to a printer that can print on larger sizes of paper, maybe go to a larger size of paper or a different printer. But we definitely want to keep an eye on the scale. That shows us a couple ways that we can manage our settings. Once we're done with our page break preview, we can then change it back to normal, and that will put us back in our normal view of our spreadsheet. Now, I've discussed where many times in Excel we see pound signs on screen, that means that the column is not wide enough to print that for it to display the number on the screen. In the page break preview, you'll often see columns that have pound signs like that. Don't panic. Just because you see a pound signs for numbers on the page break preview doesn't necessarily mean Excel is going to print pound signs on the piece of paper. Kind of a quirk in Excel. Sometimes when on the page break preview, it'll give you a false reading that the column is not wide enough for the number to print out on the piece of paper, when in reality it actually will. So to do our print preview, on the View tab, we can click on Page Break Preview. That shrinks up our screen here, so we can click OK to clear this prompt. Notice when I scroll down, shows me that I've got a few rows that are going to print on a second page. And so one thing that I could do, I didn't point out in the slide, is I could grab this little page break here and I can adjust it up and down. So if I want to make it, change where the page break is, I can grab it. Or if I want to consolidate these two pages, I can drag it down to the bottom. And so now there's just a single page. So under the page layout tab, I could also say, make it be 1 page wide by 1 page tall. And so I would then see that that's going to scale to 85%. And to print it, I can go to the File menu. I can choose Print. That gives me another print preview. And so I could then print the document if I chose to. When I want to get back to my regular view, because the downside of the page break preview is it kind of shrinks everything on the screen, go back to our View tab. We click on Normal, and that gives us back our normal printout. So Page Break Preview allows us to see where the page breaks are and adjust them. So if I didn't want to include certain columns, I could exclude those columns from the printout. Or if I wanted to make the printout bigger, I could drag to the right and expand the printout. And whenever I'm done working with my Page Break Preview, I can go back to normal and I'm back in the regular way of working in Excel. Whenever we want to add borders to our spreadsheet, we can select one or more cells, and then on the Home tab, there's a little icon that shows the border that we last used, but when we click the little arrow next to it, displays a borders menu, and then we can choose from some preset borders such as bottom border, top border, left border, so on, or top and double bottom border. I'll also show you when we get to Excel in a moment how we can go into the Format Cells dialog box and get even more control over managing the borders that we want to include with, or apply to certain worksheet cells. One of the good things about Excel 2007 and later is that it has a feature that is called Live Preview. So it lets us try out certain formatting aspects before we actually implement them. So we're going to see this more particularly with colors. Let's say that we wanted to change the colors of the totals at the bottom just to make them stand out. We're going to see that we can expand that little color palette. And then as we hover over certain colors, Excel will show us what the worksheet would look like with those colors in place. But we don't commit to that color until we actually click on it. So that's kind of a try before you buy approach with formatting on your spreadsheet, that you can just kind of hover over certain things and see if you like the way it looks before you actually go and apply it. Back to our spreadsheet, get back down to the bottom of our totals here. So we're going to click on our spreadsheet and control down. It's going to take us down to the bottom. I had applied some borders before, but we'll go ahead and clear those out. So if you've got formatting that you want to take away, go back up to that little clear command. If you say clear formats, that's going to clear out all the formatting from that cell. So notice that it not only did it get rid of the borders, it also got rid of the number formatting as well. So to restore my number formats, I can click on the colon there, not the colon, the currency sign, and that adds my formatting back. And then to deal with my borders, when I click here, I've got borders, and I can see, actually we don't really get a preview with the borders because the cell border obscures that, so we just have to kind of see based on the borders that we would pick. We click that, and then we can kind of see how that would look. If we need to get fancy though, if we click here, we go down to the very bottom of the list, we can say more borders, That's going to put us in the Format Cells dialog box. And so we can choose from, dashed borders. We can create diagonal borders. We can X out certain cells. We can, get pretty elaborate here if we choose. So for most of what you need, most of the borders that you want to apply are going to be on this particular list here. But if you do need to do anything fancy, you can go down to more borders and go there. And then for the colors, we can get a better sense of how the colors would look. Notice that if I hover over these different shades, that's when I get to see what the cells would look like. If I like that particular purple there, when I click on it, then I have then applied it to those worksheet cells.
Many times in our Excel spreadsheets, we only want to see certain data, and so lots of times users end up sorting the data or manually hiding rows when there's a better way to only view certain rows within our spreadsheet. That's called the filter command. So to use the filter command, we open up a spreadsheet that's got a list of data in it. On the Home tab over on the right, there's a sort and filter command. We choose filter, and when we do so, it adds an arrow to the top of each column in our list. We can click one of those arrows, such as in the region column, unclick select all, and then click mid-Georgia and click OK. When we do so, what the filter command does is it hides all the rows except the ones that meet our criteria. So in this case, we can see that it goes from row 1 to row 32. Rows 32 through 41 are blue. That signifies, that's one way that we can tell that those rows are filtered. Also, we can see that that rows 2 through 31 are hidden, as well as rows 42 through 51. If we want to turn the filter feature off, then we go back and just repeat steps 1 through 3. On the Home tab, we choose Sort and Filter, click Filter again. That turns the filter feature off. So when we're filtering data, we can filter on as many columns as we want. Another great thing about the filter feature is once we collapse the data down, we can then copy and paste it somewhere else, and only the visible rows will get copied and pasted. To see the filter feature in action, I'm going to go on, I've got a list of data here, and so under the Sort and Filter command on the Home tab, I'll go and I'll choose Filter. Keyboard shortcuts Control-Shift-L. In any case, that puts the filtering arrows in place here. I can then click on any arrow, shows me one of each item in the columns. So handy auditing feature, because I can click over here, I can see one of each vendor. So rather than having to scroll down trying to find something on the list, by simply turning on the filter, I get to see one of each thing in that column. So that's another helpful aspect. I can then see just a list of the cities instead of having to scroll down because there's more data than fits on the screen. So to filter the data, we click on a column. I'm going to unclick Select All, choose Mid-Georgia, click OK. Hides the rows except for the ones that have Mid-Georgia there. I can then come over to the product column, and I can say I only want to see apples and oranges. Click OK. Collapses the list down further. So now I'm going to press Control-C to copy it, and I'll press Control-N to create a new workbook. I'm going to right-click, I'm going to choose Paste Special, and I'm going to double-click on column widths. That's going to paste my column widths. Then I'm going to press the Enter key, and then it pastes my data. So when we want to carry data over to a new worksheet, if we want to get the column widths, I'm going to undo this so I can show you again. We first right-click, we go into Paste Special, and then we double-click on column widths. We've got to paste the column widths first. If we paste them second, we're going to lose our data. Paste the column widths first, then we can press the Enter key, and that allows me to take the data I filtered from the other list, copy to a new workbook, and then send it on to wherever it needs to go. If I go back to my other spreadsheet, if I want to turn off the filter feature, I simply go back and click on the filter feature. That turns off the arrows, shows me all the columns again.
In the event that you're using Excel 2013, there is a new feature that is called Quick Analysis. And now you don't have Quick Analysis in Excel 2007 or 2010, but what Quick Analysis does is it aggregates and simplifies access to a lot of data analysis tools that have long been in Excel, but are sometimes hard for users to get their head around. And so if you're not using Excel 2010 now, 13 now, at some point you most likely will. And when you in that version of Excel, if we select any range of numbers, a little icon appears. We can see that's step 2 there. We click that little icon, that's going to display the quick analysis palette. And so it's going to show us some conditional formatting tools. Conditional formatting is a feature that's on the Home tab in Excel that allows us to apply formatting based on different rules. We can see we can create charts or totals or spark lines or little charts that we can place inside our workbooks. And so if you're not up to speed on working with data analysis features in Excel and you are using Excel 2013, this can really jumpstart how you work in Excel and how you kind of expand your knowledge of some of these data analysis features. To see what I mean, we'll go to Excel. Let's say I select this block of cells. I click on my quick analysis icon. Again, this is only in Excel 2013. Displays the palette. And so data bars, that's a feature that I could get to by way of conditional formatting. So if I went to conditional formatting and chose data bars, I could apply data bars. Or if I go back and look at my quick analysis, color scales is another quick analysis, another conditional formatting tool along with icon sets. I get to preview these different choices and see what they would look like before I commit to them. If I want to see what the data would look like as a chart, shows me the data in chart form. Any one of these that I want to use, I simply click on it and that will add that chart to my workbook. We can see totals, so I could see an average, or if I go back to totals, I could see a sum. Notice as I hover over these items, then I kind of get a sense of what they would look like. Spark lines are little tiny graphs that would fit inside my workbook that would show me different trends. And not every feature is going to be applicable for every data set, but it's an easy way to try it out. So in the event that you have Excel 2013, give that a go. If you've got 2007 or 2010, conditional formatting, that's what quick analysis helps you automate. Also on the Insert tab, creating charts. Recommended charts is another new feature in Excel 2013, but you can try out any of the existing charts. The spark lines feature is available on the Insert menu. That's not in 2007, that's only in Excel 2010 and later. But in any case, Excel has a lot of data analysis tools that can help you make sense of big data sets, and I just wanted to leave you with a small sense of what's possible in that regard. Just in case anyone is not familiar with how to build a chart in Excel, we'll start out with the very basics. And so typically, if we're going to build a chart, we would have data. Perhaps we've got some fruit sales here. And so to create a chart, we can click on any cell within that block of data. We don't need to select the whole block of data. We can just click on a cell within the data. Excel 2007 and later, we're going to go to the Insert tab. And then in the chart section, just to create our first chart, we'll choose column and pick one of the 2D column charts. And when we do so, our chart then appears on the screen. Now, assuming you're already familiar with adding charts to worksheets, there are some keyboard shortcuts that we can use. In Excel 2007 and later, we can click any cell within our data and press Alt F1. That'll go ahead and create our chart on the worksheet. Now, there is a distinction we need to keep in mind with regard to charts, because charts can exist in two different places in Excel. They can exist on a worksheet, or they can exist on a special type of sheet in our workbook that's called a chart sheet, where the charts consume the entire worksheet, workbook tab. So if we want to create a new chart that's on a chart sheet, we press the F11 key. If we want to create a new chart that is on the same worksheet as our data, then we press Alt F1. Now, if we're using Excel 2007 or 2010 and we wish to have a title on our chart, we're going to have to manually add that title. Excel 2013 automatically adds a title to our chart, so we don't have to, that step goes away. But if you're still using Excel 2007 or 2010, then when you click on your chart, you're going to notice that you gain a couple of new tabs on the ribbon. And they are labeled Chart Tools. They have a little green section there. And so there's a Design tab, a Layout tab, and a Format tab. And so To add a title in Excel 2007 and later, or 2007 or 10, we're going to click on our chart, and that's what's going to activate those extra ribbon tabs. So don't let that throw you. When you click outside the tabs or outside the chart, then those tabs vanish. When you click on the chart, then they come back. So to add our title, we go to the Layout tab, we go to Chart Title, and then we can pick Above Chart or Centered Overlay. Typically, we'd add Above Chart, and that adds the title to our chart. We can then click on it and type in the title that we wish to have. Now, at the point that you move to Excel 2013, you're going to find many aspects of charting are going to be much, much easier. We create charts in the same fashion in Excel 2013 as we've seen, but for maintaining the chart, a lot of the features that were buried in the ribbon tabs across the top of the screen in Excel 2007 and 2010 have moved to these little buttons that appear when we click on our chart. And so in a moment, we'll go into Excel 2013 and I'll walk you through some of those. But particularly for the chart elements, we can just click checkboxes to add or remove items from the chart. And even better, when we hover over these different items, we're going to see that we get a preview of what they look like. So in Excel 2007 and 10, charting often requires a lot of experimentation, a lot of trial and error. All that goes away in Excel 2013. So if you are spending a lot of time building charts, you would definitely benefit from upgrading from your present version of Excel to Excel 2013 because charting in particular gained a huge overhaul. So in Excel 2013, we will create our chart. So we could go to the Insert menu as before, and we could choose Insert Column Chart and pick a chart. And notice that as we hover over these, we get an actual preview of what the chart looks like before we commit to it. So it's a bit different than the earlier versions of Excel. Really makes it easier to try different features on for size. But we'll go ahead and add that. Notice that the chart automatically has a title. We don't have to bother with adding the title. If we want to take the title away, notice we click the little plus sign and I can turn off the chart title. So simply a matter of toggling features on or off. Data labels, I can preview that. The data table, if I like that, I click on it. If I don't, I take it away. Error bars, if I wanted to see what that would look like. A trend line, different features, and also if I want to go deeper. So if I go to, say, the data table, notice I have an arrow here. I click, and then I can say, get even more options with legend keys, no legend keys, more options. And when I go into more options, then I get to go even deeper. So really kind of a pyramid approach with charting in Excel 2013, where here we're seeing the very top of the pyramid, but for any of these features, we can click in here and make selections, or if we go to more options, then we get a very elaborate panel that lets us really get granular on applying different aspects to our chart. So another thing that I like about Excel 2013 in particular is there is a filter feature, and not clear why it's not working on this particular chart here. I should be able to filter it. So let me try deleting this chart and then inserting it back again. So we're going to do Alt F1. And so normally we're able to filter our charts in Excel 2013. So let's just try one more quick go at it here. And then we're going to add that. All right, some anomaly there is blocking me from being able to filter this particular chart. Let me see if I've got a different chart that I can open. I know what the anomaly is. I've opened up a new file that is charts.xlsx, and so when we come in here, we're going to do Alt F1. That's going to give us our chart. We're going to zoom out here, and notice that this time our funnel feature is turned on. And so what that lets me do, if I want to turn off certain months, I can just clear those and then click apply and turns them off. But notice when we went back to the other workbook, that feature was disabled. Reason it was disabled, and this constantly trips me up, and that's why I'm taking a moment to spend some time on it, is this workbook has a .xls extension. Anytime you're working with the old school workbooks that have that .xls extension, certain features in Excel 2007 and later are going to be disabled, and sometimes cryptically. And that's why our funnel feature was disabled. So if you have old workbooks that are in that old school format and you don't need to keep them in that way, if we go to the File menu, there is under Info, Excel 2010 and 13, there is a Convert button. And we click that Convert button, that will convert our workbook to the new format and then enable all the functionality. So that's just a quick rundown on some Excel 2013 specific features, and also just a caution to be careful with these XLS workbooks, because you'll be bopping along working in Excel. One day a feature won't work unexpectedly and can really frustrate you. And so that's something to be on the lookout for.
A particularly nice feature in Excel 2013 is the recommended charts feature. This does not exist in 2010 and earlier, but it was added in Excel 2013. It's actually a feature that Microsoft tried out a few years ago as kind of an add-on for the earlier versions of Excel. It was kind of a charting wizard, and it finally made its way into a production version of Excel. What it's designed to do, let's assume that you know nothing about charts. You know you need to create a chart, and you know you have some data, but you have just no concept of how to even start trying out these different charts. What you can do is select a block of data, go to the Insert tab in Excel 2013, click on Recommended Charts. That's going to bring up an Insert Chart wizard that's going to show you a selection of different charts with your real data. Unlike the earlier versions of Excel that could just kind of show you these static pictures, in Excel 2013, whenever you're previewing a chart, it's based on your real data. And so if you find one that you like, you can click on it. Or if you go to all charts, then you can get even granular, go through and navigate on the different chart types. So back to Excel 2013, on my Insert tab, there is a choice for Recommended Charts. I'll click on that. That brings up the Insert Chart dialog box. And so as I click on these different charts, I get to see what they look like. It gives me a description of how that chart presents the data. And if none of these are to my satisfaction, then I can go to All Charts. And notice what's different about the earlier versions of Excel. I didn't get to see my actual data. I get to see a picture of the chart, but not my actual data in it. And so, in fact, if I hover over these, the actual chart pops out, a picture of it pops out. And so, really gives me a much better sense of how to build these different charts. And see, we've got a combo chart, lots of different features that are, it's just much easier to quickly build a chart on the fly in Excel 2013 than it has been historically.
A technique that often gets overlooked is the ability to copy formatting from one chart to another. So if you are creating a series of charts and need them to all have the same look and feel, you don't have to go through and do painstaking formatting chart by chart. You can format one chart and then easily copy and paste the rest of the format, all the formatting to a second chart, or as many charts as you wish. Now, as with many things in Excel, there's a little bit of nuance in how we do this. And so what we need to do is we need to right click on what's called the chart area. And so if you look at step 1 on the slide, you can see the chart area is the outside edge of the chart. So we don't want to be inside the body of the chart. That's called the plot area. And if we right click in there, we're going to get a different set of options. So we want to right click around the outside border of the chart in the chart area. When we do so, we'll see we have a copy command. We can then left click and select the second chart that we wish to apply our formatting to. And then we're going to go to the paste command, and we're going to go to paste special. Now, we can't right-click on our chart and do Paste Special. We do need to go through the Paste command on the ribbon up at the top. And so we're going to click that Paste command, go to our Paste Special command, and in that case, we'll get a special version of the Paste Special dialog box. We'll choose Formats, and then we'll click OK, and that will transfer the formatting from one chart to our second chart. Another area of Excel that can be frustrating for folks is creating a chart that has two different axes. So let's say that you're plotting numbers and you're also plotting percentages. It's actually easy to do, but it's just one of those nuanced things that either you might not do it often enough to remember the steps, or you just might not have been successful in creating such a chart in the past. But we're going to cover two different elements. Let's say we create our chart in the usual fashion. So we have our apples and oranges chart. And then we decide that we want to add a profit percentage or a ratio onto our chart. One technique that we see here on this slide, if I want to add new data to my chart, I can simply copy, if I have an existing chart, I can select that data, right-click on the chart and choose Paste, and that will add that data to the chart. So that gives me an easy way to add new data to my chart. I just type in the data in the worksheet cells, and then instead of going through the select data command on the design tab to resize the chart, I'm just simply copy and paste the data I want onto the chart. That expands the chart. To then change it to a separate axis, what we're going to do, so we'll just follow the numbered steps because there's a series of steps here. So if we follow it by number, it'll make sense for us. So step one, we added our profit percentages and we copied that to the clipboard. Control-C is an easy way to do that. We right-clicked on the chart area, so that outside border, the outside white, the white area around the periphery of the chart. Right-click on that, choose Paste, and then step 4, what we're going to do is we're going to click on the bar that corresponds to the second axis. Now, in this case, that item is so tiny I can't even see it because the number's so small. But if you just click where you would think the bar would be, that's going to allow you to select it. So once we see where it is, we can right-click on it. Step 5, we're going to say Change the Series Chart Type. That's going to bring up a Change Chart Type dialog box. So step 6, we're going to click Line. Step 7, we'll make one of those choices. Step 8, we'll click OK. Then what we need to do is we need to right-click again on one of those bars or points on our new chart. And this time we're going to choose Format Data Series. That's going to bring up a Format Data Series dialog box. And the first set of options is Series Options. And we're going to choose Secondary Axis and click Close. And then we'll see that we'll be plotting the sales on along the left-hand axis in dollars and tracking the profit on the right-hand axis as a percentage and with a line chart. So that allows us to present two different types of data on the same chart. Now, in Excel 2013, there's another change here. Lots of changes with regard to the charting in Excel 2013. There is a new type of chart in Excel 2013. It's called a combo chart. And so you'll have to change your chart to a combo chart in Excel 2013 in order to carry out this particular technique. This next technique involves resizing charts or adding data to charts. And I want to show you an easy way here. When we get to Excel, I'll show you the hard way. And in a moment, we're going to see yet a better way that we can automate and not have to even worry about manually adding data to charts. But with charts in Excel, there's often this tension where if we have charts that are monthly charts where we're adding a new month of data, we have to decide, do we build out all 12 months and then have if it's a line chart, have it crash down to 0 for the rest of the year? Or do we only include the months that have currently elapsed during the year and then get stuck manually resizing the chart month after month? So if we do have a chart that we are resizing in this fashion, once we've built the chart, if we add a new column of data to it, easiest way to resize the chart is to click once on the chart. That's going to highlight the components of the data areas of the chart. There's a little blue handle that you can grab. That's step 3 there. Grab that little handle, drag it to the right. That'll add that new month to the chart. So that saves you from going into the select data command on the design tab and having to go through that rigmarole that I'll show you in a moment. So once we click on the chart, Excel identifies the boundaries of the data. We can grab one of the handles for that data and drag it to the right to expand our chart.
Although it's pretty easy to manually resize a chart, always much better and eliminate some of the risk of our spreadsheet if we can make our charts expand automatically. And so to do so, we can use the table feature in Excel. One of the benefits to tables is they resize themselves automatically as we add data into adjacent columns. And so we can retrofit any existing charts that we have and make them self-expanding. To do so, we'll click on any cell for our chart data, go to the Insert tab, choose Table, and then we'll click OK. At that point, if we then go and add, so presently my chart has data for April through May. If I go to the column G, add in figures for June, we're going to see that the table expands automatically and the chart then expands automatically.
Once we've automated our charts by way of the table feature, next element that we want to try to automate is the chart title. So we're going to go through a two-step process. First thing I'm going to do is show you on this slide how we can link our title of our chart to a worksheet cell. Once we've done that, then we can take it to the next level, which is to replace the manually updating the worksheet cell with an actual formula, and then we'll truly have a chart that is self-maintaining. But if we want to link our chart to a worksheet cell, what we're going to do is we're going to click once on the chart title. We're then going to go up to the formula bar and type an equal sign. Then once we've typed that equal sign, then we go and click on the worksheet cell that we want to link it to and then press enter. At that point, any changes we make to the cell that we link to, that when we change the cell, the title will then update itself. Now, the technique is nuanced, and we have to do it in a very specific order. If you click on the chart title and then click on the worksheet cell without typing that equal sign, then you're simply going to select the cell and you're not going to be able to link the title. So make sure that you slow down, click on the chart title, go up to the formula bar, type an equal sign, then click on the worksheet cell, and that will link the title of your chart to a worksheet cell.
Once I have linked my chart to a worksheet cell, I can then create a formula that as I add columns to the chart, the formula will look up the last column, and then since the chart title is linked to that cell, it will then update the chart title automatically. So with the combination of the table adding new columns to the chart and then the formula that I'm about to create updating the title, I really have a set and forget approach, and that's the gold standard in Excel. Is we really want to think about our worksheets hard up front, and then to the extent possible make them feature proof. So then in the future we can just focus on adding some new data, and everything happens automatically as we go. We don't have to think about it. So to accomplish this, we are going to use a couple techniques, a couple worksheet functions, and then a technique called concatenation. So let's hone in on the worksheet functions first. The first function we're going to use is the count A function. And what count A does is it determines the number of non-blank cells in a given range. Now in this case, for simplicity, what I've done is I've told Excel to count all the non-blank cells in row 1. That's why there's a 1:1. Now you could easily change this, replace the 1:1 with say A1 through P1 or wherever the outside range of where your chart data might expand to. But when I can, I always try to just refer to the entire row or the entire column. It simplifies the formula, and then also I don't end up having to go back and amend the formula in the future. So count A is returning a number. It's returning the number of non-blank cells. Now that number by itself doesn't help me directly. How it helps me indirectly is I can feed that number to the index function. What the index function does is it can return a piece of information, and so what it's going to do is it's going to look across row 1 as well, and it's going to go over to whatever cell count A returned and return the contents of that cell. And so that's what makes this in turn be dynamic, because as I fill in additional cells to the right, count A will return a larger number, index will return the value of whatever that last cell is. Now, in this case, I probably don't want just the word June for my title. I probably want to add something to it, such as the word sales. And so the technique I'm using here is called concatenation. That means I can add a word on to the end of my title. I can really add it any place, but in effect what I'm doing is I'm taking contents from a worksheet cell or a formula and then adding some text to it. And so Excel does have a concatenate worksheet function, but that is a function that I never use because I can use the ampersand instead. So with a combination of my count A inside the index function, tack on the ampersand, and then whatever text I want to include, I enclose that in double quotes. And so since my chart title is linked to, in this case, cell A6, then as I add more data, next when I go and add data in column H, that will become July sales, which will then show up on the chart, and the chart is completely automated. That brings us to the end of this presentation. I hope that you found it helpful. I am happy to answer follow-up questions related to this material. So if there's anything in the handout that's not clear, or if you get tangled up along the way trying any of these techniques, do feel free to let me know. I'm always happy to answer follow-up questions. You can also get more Excel knowledge from time to time if you follow me on one of the social networks. I do write articles about Excel, and when I do so, I do publicize links to the articles that I've written. In any case, thanks for watching, and I hope that you found the presentation helpful.